guess that's like a good segue for us to talk about The Witcher, which obviously came out a few weeks ago, but we haven't had, because of the holidays, we haven't had the ability to kind of come together and do a proper review, but here we are now. The Witcher, starring Henry Cavill and as Geralt of Rivia, doing his Witcher things and doing his Witcher ways. One of the best things about this is apparently the author came out and said that Henry Cavill is like the definitive Geralt, which is pretty cool. So now, they even have the author's approval of this being the optimal and definitive Geralt, which I'm kind of really happy about. Because one of the best things about this show is that anytime Henry Cavill is on the screen, he basically steals the scene itself, even if he's like even like a background character to the scene, because he just kind of has this kind of
he has this presence. He has this presence about him.
Presence.
And
exactly.
and I feel like that's one of the probably the best thing about this show is that Henry Cavill as casting is pretty much perfect. He does a really good job. Even the voice actor of the Geralt in the video games, he pretty much mimics his like voice, I guess, where it's kind of very husky, very like low. He's not trying to show any emotion, because in essence, like, witches don't really show that really emotion. They're born kind of trained to be killers of monsters, so obviously he's that type of character who is stays silent when he needs to most of the time, and does his whole thing. Basically, because I'm a big Witcher fan, read the books and everything, and played all the games. So essentially, in my kind of look and retrospect of this TV show, I think it's good but not great.
Okay.
I feel like there's a lot of things that I would say that they don't hit, that makes it like they just miss that good greatness or type of setup type of thing. Obviously, as we were talking about before, Henry Cavill's a great actor and he does a really great thing. But I think I think what's really lacking is pretty much plot and world building. I feel like that is its weakest strength. I mean, not weakest strength. Well, it's weakest part of this show. Basically, the show's story is book 1 and 2. Well, book 1 and 3, but it's basically book 1 and 3, but they're short stories, and 2 is like kind of like when it's like a normal narrative type of thing. So if that makes any sense. So
well, I kind of get it. Because from what I understand is like this is all. So Witcher 3 is technically a prequel to the Witcher 1 and 2 video game, correct? So it's like the first in the timeline.
No.
No.
The first one is still Witcher 1. But like I think that where people get confused is like, I think at the current moment, ditch the video game like kind of like knowledge of the video game, I guess, because I guess that's like stuff coming in. Essentially, book 1, there's a few things as I mentioned before, this season is basically book 1 and 3, which are the short stories that lead up to the main story of Ciri, which she gets a lot more things to do in this. Ciri, I think in the books is like a 10-year-old girl and not like a 16, 17-year-old girl. And
they kind of
and her stuff is, I'll say it out here, her stuff is actually the worst part of this this show, which is obviously obviously because they
Completely
made it
agree.
for the show. And didn't have the writer.
Well, the thing that I wanted to mention, like, I wasn't necessarily saying that the TV series is based on The Witcher 3. Like, I'm aware that because I actually mentioned the Wild Hunt in the TV series as well. So I was like, oh, okay, maybe like again, this is coming from somebody whose only exposure to The Witcher was playing a little bit of Witcher 2, but never going back and playing it. So for me, I'm just the same as coming into this particular series quite new. Yeah. So like, the TV series is technically based before the games as well. I was just trying to put a little bit of a timeline for people who maybe have just played the games, for example.
Yeah.
Right.
More or less.
But like like they mentioned the Wild Hunt like, oh, okay, like that was like my first hint of, oh, when do the games actually, like where is it set in terms of the games? But as somebody kind of enlightened me of it, it's like set before Witcher 3, which is technically a prequel to Witcher 1 and 2. But yeah, like all this stuff, like, so it's based off the first couple of books. And do you think they're going to just be following the books at this stage in terms of the direction they're going to? Have you read the books?
Yes, I think so, because a lot of, like, I think, as I mentioned before, I think it's good but not great, and I think the main problem is it's probably following the structure of the books too much, instead of making something a little bit more cohesive to make it into a TV show. For example, I think the pilot is like the worst episode. It doesn't do well to engage you. Like, for me personally, it didn't do... Like, if you didn't know anything about Witcher and the world about the witches and how the mechanics of magic and the mechanics of who these people are in relation to everything, I think the plot of the plot of the pilot episode is the worst. I was watching with someone who had no idea what any of this stuff was, and she was bored out of her mind, being like, I have no idea why people are doing this or that. And yeah, they were very, I guess, bored out of their mind. I'm like, this is, for me, I thought it was a weird take. I thought, me, they should have kind of built up a little bit more, kind of at the start to kind of really get you hooked, I guess.
Yeah, I'll put a bit of a warning now. Like, yeah, we're going to be talking spoilers about everything today. Witcher, Watchmen, Mandalorian, Star Wars. So yeah, obviously, if you haven't seen them, just like, we'll try and keep it at least, something secret, but yeah, we'll probably, in order to kind of give our review about stuff, is kind of necessary. So like, I think the big mistake, so I don't actually think the first episode's bad. There's a lot of like kind of action in it. Like, obviously, like, he kind of, you see like the town kind of like, gets like ransacked, and, I think it's like Sintra, is it? Like, it gets, kind of, destroyed by like the neighboring, kingdom.
Yeah, and that's one of the that's kind of, yeah, I would say the main plot of book 1 and 2, which leads into book 3, because at that point, Ciri is already with Geralt at that time, and basically doing training, and that's why everyone's like, that's kind of the official start. This is kind of a lot of build up to the main event, I guess.
You see the problem with this is that I feel like this episode was put out of order. It should have been placed like at the end, or like towards the end, because as you kind of find out as you watch this show, you're following two different timelines, so to speak, like two different like points in time, right? Whereas the attack on Sintra is kind of like the modern, or like the present timeline, and you are following Ciri as she's running away, after the events of the castle the kingdom being ransacked, rather. And then any point of time that you see Witcher, or Geralt, that's like things that are happening in the past that are slowly moving their way over towards the present. Because eventually you see, they even say in the first episode, oh, we have to get him from the dungeon, which doesn't really make sense until much later in the series, where you find out that, oh, like, they actually captured and put the Witcher like in the dungeon, and he escapes, and you see that happen in either the second or last episode. I'm not really too sure which one, but it just feels like they did this in order to have that dramatic, oh, we have a big kind of Game of Thrones-esque battle, and oh, there's blood and stuff. But the problem is, like, later on in the series, you see the queen, you see I think the uncle, you see Ciri's mother, and you're like, wait a second, like, aren't all these people supposed to be dead? But then you realize, oh, it's supposed to be based in the past. And then, as the series progresses, and you meet Yennefer and some of the other characters, you're like, oh, okay, these characters are also must be in the past. And then you come to the conclusion of, oh, anything that hasn't reached to the point where he is seeing Ciri, because you find out about the I forget what it is, that particular like
they call it their destiny, like basically. But yeah, and I think I know what you mean, and I think like a lot of this, like, to me, I feel like a lot of, with all the plot structure and things like that, I feel like all they really had to do, I think, had to do episode 4 first, which is the one where I think that's kind of like the prequel before everything. And even have that scene. Essentially, that one is the kingdom of Sintra is kind of like a generation behind, and the witch is there doing his own thing, and a fight breaks loose. This is in the book, where a knight is sworn to marry the princess because he saved the king's life. And he's kind of deformed, and the Geralt defends him
like a werewolf.
And basically when that happens is like obviously magic and promises, and what happens is he, I guess by destiny, and they talk about a lot in the books, and that's why the second book is called The Sword of Destiny, is that Geralt doesn't believe in it, and he basically gets Ciri as like a partner / companion almost by destiny. And I feel like even if they just played the first 20 minutes and then rolled like The Witcher and then did something in the prequel, like everything else before then, or like in the future, I think it would make a little bit more sense. But I feel like it took up until episode 4 to be like, okay, this is how, for me personally, like, okay, this is how they're doing it,
Yeah, you see, the problem is, like, they kind of wanted to do, like, a Westworld style, ooh, which timeline, or which time are they in? But it's, like, it's not like that, and the gimmick isn't as interesting. It's, like, it's very obvious, okay, Ciri's in the present / future, Witcher, anything with the Witcher is in the past. Like, there's nothing too, like, high IQ about it. You figure that shit out pretty much straight away. The problem is, like, I think it would be far more interesting if they had have done it, like, very similarly to how you said, like, maybe they had episode 4 and then they had episode 1 and the conclusion of, like, it's like in the classic way of, like, like in a classic Shakespearean way where, people ignore, all the bad things that happen, and they kind of look down upon it and ignore the warnings. That leads to the consequence and the bad events that subsequently happen, like, very similar to Game of Thrones, right? When, what's his face needed to marry some queen from the river people and didn't, and then got his ass fucking killed at the Red Wedding, like, that's like an example. Like, if the opposite, like, the equivalent would be if they showed what happened to the Red Wedding, and they showed that at the beginning, and then they showed the events leading to the Red Wedding, but then they don't show the actual event again. It just seems really out of place and really, like, disjointed in that way, and I think they purely did it. And I think ultimately the reason why they had to do it is what you actually said earlier, which was, Ciri actually doesn't really have much to do in the series other than running away from various camps, and because she's obviously being chased because of the cool kind of power that she has, right, that she inherited from her mother, and subsequently, she's going from place to place, like a different camp. Then she's in a forest at one stage, and and then she fights like a shapeshifter dude. But it all is kind of irrelevant to the grand scheme of what's happening in the world, because eventually, she's still in the same point when Witcher finds her. Like, it's not like she becomes like stronger or anything like that. It just seems like
she doesn't have a journey as a character aside from her being like, I'm rich and now the world's bleak and gruesome, and now it's like, oh no, like, I didn't see this before. She doesn't really have an arc until, like, that's her arc basically. That's why I was saying before they really try to shove her in the type of plot, and I felt like it would have been a lot better with the characters, because essentially with the two main books, as I was mentioning before, the two starting points of the books and kind of the whole story, it really is Geralt and Yennefer, and then Dandelion, which is not called Dandelion in the show, and that's kind of like the trio, and they go on like little adventures hunting down monsters. A lot of the things that are in the books are in this the thing, including the first episode. I forgot her name, but the sorceress and
Yennefer.
In the first episode where the girl wants to kill the priest, the mage.
Like the kind of like the first girl,
and that's why essentially he gets called the Butcher of Blaviken, because of that event. So it's like all these things tie in, but I feel like if you took away the Ciri part, you'd have more reasons for the characters to breathe. I guess more reasons for the have character exposition as well as world building. Because with the whole Yennefer thing, I feel like for people who aren't known about the whole magic inside of things, they do some magic stuff, but they go past it very quickly. So people who aren't aware, they'll be like, I kind of know how magic works, and Geralt has magic, but he kind of doesn't, sort of like.
We'll get to Yennefer in just a moment. We'll just quickly wrap up about Ciri. So the main thing about Ciri, I think, is the act, like, because she doesn't have much to do in this series, they needed to actually have her in like every episode in some capacity. But everything that happens to her could have been put in one episode, right? Like realistically, because there's nothing really that dramatic. They're kind of like the flashback sequences in like Arrow or something. You know, they're very small, they're very concise, and not much happens. Like I think much more. I don't know how they would have went about it, like trying to put her in everything, because it just wouldn't make sense. Like maybe they could have done something like like her appear in like the castle prior to the events of the first episode and see her like maybe try and learn about her powers, or being like a miscreant, like, because obviously she pretended to be like a commoner on the street, so maybe there could have been a little bit more about that, like her interacting with people on the streets rather than her on the run. But yeah, I think that's ultimately the problem with Ciri. And yeah, she's like probably one of the weaker characters, but I guess we can kind of go on to Yennefer. Like you mentioned, like, yeah, there isn't. Here's the thing. I don't necessarily have a problem with them not mentioning how certain things function, right? Like, for example, like, you know, The Witcher, clearly The Witcher, you can kind of guess what he is, like, based on what they talk about in the show. Like, essentially he's more or less like a genetically or like a magically engineered, like, person.
Yeah, I think they do a really good.
They
do a really good way of describing him. I think in the first episode where he goes to the bar in the pub and no one likes him, and because at that point in time, witches aren't really used because all the big monsters have been dead.
So here's the problem. There isn't a good metric to measure time in the series.
Mm-hmm.
So while, like, you know, as you mentioned, like, you know, the Butcher of Blaviken and stuff, between episodes, like, you would have thought like it happened a week ago, because there's no concept of time. Like, even in a later episode where the Witcher is like fishing for a gin in a river, like, you know, Dandelion, as you mentioned, I forget what he's called in the actual show, but, you know, he kind of comes and he says to Witcher, "Oh, how long has it been since I've seen you? A year, a month? Like, you know, time. You know, what can you do?" And that's kind of like them doing like a self-referential joke to the fact that you can't really tell how much time has passed between certain events. Like, you know, later on, like, you know, Yennefer and Geralt have like a sexual relationship, like a romantic relationship, and then they meet each other later for like a dragon hunt. But
yeah,
it's kind of described. No, but the problem is, like, it's described that there's been a big length of time between that they last saw each other, but it's not obvious.
Yeah, and that's why I'm saying it really is pulling a lot of things from the books, but leaving certain things out. Like, there's one short story that they did leave out, and I think it's like it deals with Geralt and Yennefer's relationship. Is that basically Yennefer is talking to an old flame, and he wants to kind of like marry her, kind of be in a long relationship with her, and but that at that time, you know, her and Geralt kind of have like a fight almost. What happened with the Djinn, basically, you know, they had a whole journey with the Djinn, and basically they, you know, had a whole relationship, and then they kind of, you know, hate each other, and then when that guy comes in, they basically have a whole fight of like, it's a love triangle where it's like, who deserves Yennefer, and then at that point, you know, Yennefer leaves, ditches both of them. At that point, and then she and he don't see each other for a very long time until the hunt of the dragon. So there's there's a lot of cool things where it's like, you know, they just said, oh, there's a past history, and, you know, oh yeah, and it's like, this is the first season. Like, I wanted to see that at least.
Well, here's the thing. Like, I think that story kind of like, you know, obviously it would have been good if they had have included it like as an extra episode on its own. I think the problem is like, it isn't the fact that the relationship between those two, because obviously, like, you know, even Witcher, like, you know, Witcher says like a really good line. Like, again, Henry Cavill absolutely sells everything as a character. He says, like, you know, when I'm with you, I speak more words than I say in like a week or something like that, right? So it like kind of shows that, yeah, like around her, he kind of feels more like a person, right? So you kind of get that. But the problem is, like, it's not, you don't doubt the fact that he loves her or they have that kind of relationship to get together. The problem is the length of time kind of makes it seem like he's talking about a girl that he met last week, and it's like, oh, sorry, like that I ditched you last week and left. Like, no, this is supposed to be like several months or several years or whatever since he's last seen her. The problem is that they're immortal characters and they don't age, and there's no reference, all right? Like, there should be something like 6 months later, or it's been 6 months since I've seen you, and that gives the like an adage or some kind of reference point to say like, hey, these characters haven't seen each other for so long, right? I think Dandelion might be some kind of immortal creature as well. He has to be for him to not also age, right? Like, it doesn't seem to make sense otherwise, because everybody else is like kind of inconsequential to the rest of the series. They'll just be random peasants or something. Am I somewhat correct with me saying that?
I know. I think
Is Dandelion immortal? Totally is.
It's like probably, who knows?
Yeah, exactly. Because why doesn't he age? Exposed.
And that's what I was mentioning before. It's like this show is good in its kind of content. However, there's certain things that hold it back from being great. And as I mentioned before, it's the plot structure and kind of like having these little things to cue in audiences to get them more into, I guess, this show. And that's the thing. It's like a lot of things are great. Like, I think the special effects are pretty good, especially for something that is on Netflix. And, there's a few things that are really CGI heavy, especially I think in the first episode where you get that spider monster, or is it octopus monster? I don't remember. But yeah, they do have a lot of good scenes. They do have a lot of, I guess, big battle scenes. Obviously, if they have to shoot at nighttime to cover the CGI and all that. But yeah, I know. I enjoy this. I enjoy the series, but I know it could be better, just
So
purely on structure and, I guess, ways they structure sentences, I guess.
Well, here's the thing. Or I guess episodes, right? So here's the thing. Another thing that I kind of so anything that's Witcher related, I really liked. Anything except for like all the origin of Yennefer's character was kind of like either boring or really was, I don't know, not really interesting to watch, right? That was for me personally. You've read the book, so I don't know if
they don't really give her much. They just say,
Okay.
yeah, she basically gets to a school type of thing, and there's more. She has kind of a story where she wants, like, I don't think it comes across on the TV show. Only maybe in like one episode with the dragon, but essentially, she with having magic. Obviously you become barren, so you can't have kids.
She has a uterus torn out of her.
And they don't really explain that in books. I think it's more explained that like the more you use magic, the less it just disintegrates over time instead of just completely pulling it out.
Well, I mean, I kind of like how they did it in the show. Like, it's pretty, like that whole scene where they have because here's my main problem with Yennefer's story arc. There's obviously she starts at the school and she's like ugly and she's like a hunchback and she can't do magic properly. But then, later on, her sisters become eels at one stage. But they could all use magic. But then there is this focus by the head mistress to have her be the person who's like the representative witch or whatever of so-and-so castle. The problem is we don't get to see her use any magic. This isn't like, this is supposed to be like at least Harry Potter in some respect. Show us her trying to use magic and being, show, not tell. All we get told throughout this, later on when we see her defending, like, there's like some noble queen or something, in a carriage, and we see her using her magic to like teleport them across like different dimensions while they're being like chased by some kind of medieval assassin, right? We have that scene. It's like, okay, that's an example of her showing that she's really powerful magically. But in the show, and in the earlier parts of her career, in magic, they don't do that. It's like more or less after she became barren, and they kind of used her uterus to make like this kind of flaky potion thingamajig. Did she become one hot and then able to use magic, right? Like,
well, that's the thing. I don't, from what I remember, the books don't describe her as ugly. I think they just put that in there for the TV show to make her like, maybe more relatable or something like that.
Relatable. Because she's definitely not. Because she comes off as a fucking bitch.
Yes,
throughout the fucking
pretty
show.
much, and that's where she should come off, essentially, because the first time you do see Yennefer, it's actually in the Jin point where basically he's there with Dandelion. He rubs the lamp, he gets sick, and then Geralt's like, yeah, I can't fix this, so I have to go to this magical sorceress, and that's the first time he meets Yennefer. Sure. But instead of in such a way where it's like he goes to some sort of mansion, it's more like she comes to them and things like that. It's different in a way, and then they kind of build a relationship from there. But yeah, there was the whole.
So you're telling me the giant orgy was just for Netflix, is it?
Pretty much, yeah. So, but and that's the thing, and she's more just. I think she's more in the books. She's more described as like a kind of a mistress, where she's like, I don't need relationship with like anyone. I just want to do my own thing. And then, that's why she finds Geralt interesting, because he's not like a man. Like, he's a man, but he's not really a man. And I think that's one of the main reasons. And also because they're both effed up, because experiments were done on him. And in essence, she really wants to have a kid, and magic's kind of screwed her up as well. And that's one of the main reasons why she wants, and I think they explain it in the episode, that's one of the main reasons why she wants to capture the elusive golden dragon, because if you capture the dragon, it grants wishes, and her wish was to be... to have kids, and that's why you see, I guess, her being a semi-mother to Ciri in the future. But however, that's not really a thing, I feel like, or might not be a thing, because like Ciri, as I mentioned before, instead of being like a 10-year-old girl, she's like 16, 17 type of thing. So it kind of skips that. Another thing.
Well, it doesn't mean she can't be like. Is she 16 in the show? Is that what it's?
I don't know. I don't know what age she is, but she's obviously old-ish. She's not like a little, girl. And I think in the books they describe her as like 8 or something. She's definitely not 8 in the TV show. I feel like she's a lot.
I think she does look like kind of young, but yeah, at the same time, like you're right. Like they might do like a Game of Thrones and just age her up a little. I mean, there's still chance. There is probably still a chance for them to kind of have that relationship between Yennefer and her. I just hope that again they do things. Kind of organically and not like all over the place like they did with this series. Look, that's a problem. Look, the actress who plays Yennefer kind of like nails the whole like cold-hearted, witch, character. It's just my problem is like her backstory is kind of like really lame and not really super interesting. And you have all the witches coming together to stop that neighboring nation with the kind of eviler witch. I guess none of the wizards and witches are evil, right? But there's like that evil witch.
They have a kind of council, and at some point, Yennefer's just like, yeah, screw the council. Same with Triss Merigold as well, which I think they've kind of really screwed her over in this TV show at the current moment. Her character, the way they portray her, is not accurate. She's actually a pretty big, and she's she is a big player, but I think in the next story, because she's one of the chosen ones with Ciri and Geralt, and they basically have a fight. So I think if I remember, didn't she die sort of?
Who, Triss? No, Triss is alive.
Yeah.
She gets burnt.
Yeah. Because essentially the whole thing is like alive. She dies sort of, but kind of comes back. And the people of the Wild Hunt, the kind of foreshadowing this kind of version of the White Walkers, kind of foreshadow that she should have died. So we need to bring your soul back because you cheated death type of thing. So I think she's known as the 13th one because she's the 13th one who died on the hill. But I don't know if they're going to do any of that whatsoever, and lore wise. But regardless, I think they're relatively streamlined it. I think pretty well. I think.
Yeah, I think here's the thing, right? Like they've mentioned that this show can go on for like several seasons, like a lot, like 7+ seasons if they needed to. And I think like, especially given, I don't know, the state of Henry Cavill, we've been memeing it like, I don't know, for over a year now, what the situation is with Henry Cavill and, Superman. And so him having and being the Witcher, aka the people's person, right? I can imagine him like being totally on board. Like, it was really funny. I think like during an interview, Cavill said, to a question whether Xbox or PS4, and he replied with PC. So he's definitely a connoisseur, a gaming connoisseur.
He knows.
He knows what he knows how to, or at least he knows how to pander, right? Like, and I appreciate that. And look, and the thing is, he went through a lot of effort to get to, the state that he was for the show. In order for that bath scene where he's just like completely ripped in the bath, apparently he went on he did a dehydration, like he didn't drink water for 3 days.
Oh, he did a Hugh Jackman for I think Logan or whatever it was. They basically just like don't drink for a while, so then your veins kind of pop out.
Your veins pop out and your skin kind of like goes like and like kind of clings onto your muscles a lot more, so it just like accentuates it. So that's what he did, and he did that for the series. So expect probably more dehydrations in the future for Henry, because I think he again, he did a really good job. And look, and the same thing with, I'd say, with Yennefer as well, the actor. I think she's Anya something. I like her character. I just don't think they did a good job with her.
I think their version of Dandelion, the Jaskia, really great, nailed it. Really good catchy song with him. Basically, he's
was like that in the game or any of the
song? No, not
no,
the
so
not. That's an original thing, but still, like, he's a bard, and
well, that's what I'm saying. That's a good example of them kind of expanding the lore of The Witcher by doing something like having a really catchy song from him.
And especially it's good to have at least semi-comedic relief, at least having like a character like that in this type of world, and it's just really good.
He's like the funny guy to Geralt's straight man, right? Like, Geralt does have the odd like kind of jokes here and there that he kind of springs, and it's usually with Dandelion as the fall guy to his jokes. So it is good to see like their relationship, and that like while he doesn't really consider Dandelion a friend per se, he does actually care for him. But again, it kind of makes it feel like they just met each other like a day ago.
Yeah, because the other episode they explained like, oh yeah, everyone hates witches, yada yada yada, and he goes on this kind of first adventure with Geralt, and that's when the song happens. I think in the next like episode or two, he's at a bar and everyone loves Geralt like a Witcher, and everyone's like, toss the coin to the Witcher type of thing. So, but it's like it's not explaining, I guess, the journey, because there's a whole thing of like everyone hates witches at the first episode, and I think 2 episodes down the line, everyone's like, we love witches. So I feel like that kind of changed almost, like because you don't see that journey, I guess. And as you mentioned before, and you nailed it on the head. It really is just the passage of time, and really explaining to the audience of like, this is past, this is what's happened. I feel like that's all the series really needed. Yeah,
if it solves that problem, which I think hopefully they will, because an article got released semi-recently with them saying that the showrunner Lauren Hisrich had mentioned that season 2 will have a much more focused story that kind of obviously starts off and gets established in season 1. So hopefully it'll all kind of come together moving forward. And it's not too surprising. Like, we've said it before, a lot of TV shows have like a rocky first season where they're just trying to find their footing, and especially given that a lot of the popularity of The Witcher does come from the video games. I think like the modern popularity of The Witcher comes from the video game.
Yeah, it'd be like the Song of Ice and Fire, aka Game of Thrones, was really got shoved into the spotlight because of the TV show. Like I think it was already established, series, and people loved it, but it wasn't in the mainstream like it blew up into purely because of it. And I think the games really did skyrocket those set of novels that before they weren't even translated out of Polish, only until the games really came out. So.
Exactly, and it kind of led to even the author at the time. I think it's like Andrzej Sapkowski or something.
Sapkowski.
He hated the creators of the Witcher video games because I think they had like either they had like full rights or something to make like video games and stuff, but apparently like now it's all kind of sorted out and they have like a new deal, and he had like they all have like a good relationship now. So I'm very happy about that, because moving forward, like you kind of want that in a business relationship between people that you work with, especially for the game. And the great thing is the Witcher series kind of prompted like hundreds of thousands of people to kind of go back and play The Witcher 3. It hit 48,000 concurrent players on Steam, which hasn't been as high since 2016. So it definitely did spark a lot of people to play the game, and I think about it like an estimated 1 million people played in December. So it makes sense that there is a lot of kind of cross playing, cross component, cross marketing synergy, or whatever you want to really call it, between all that. It makes me want to actually play The Witcher 3 now that I know that chronologically The Witcher 3 happens first. It kind of makes me, because usually I like to play games on in the release order. You know what I mean, Don? But like given that the story technically comes first, I might consider picking up Witcher 3 once I'm done with Breath of the Wild. But overall, look, it is definitely not a perfect show, and I think if you look at Rotten Tomatoes, for example. Before it was, the reviewers had it at like a score of like rotten at 56, but by the time of this recording, it's on 60%. So 60% of the reviewers enjoyed it, while 93% of the audience enjoyed the TV series. So yeah, I also don't consider this like a perfect
I think it's like a 7 out of 10 type of thing, or 7.5, where it's like it's good. There's just a few things that are holding it back. That if they just fine tuned it, it'd be like a really phenomenal
good
show.
Completely agree. And yeah, again, with Henry Cavill kind of being the main star and being the person who kind of will be moving the plot forward alongside Yennefer and whatnot. And look, even Triss, like obviously she didn't really have much to do this season. I know she's like a pretty important character in the game. They kind of race swapped her. They did the whole thing that I mentioned, how they've been replacing redheads with black characters.
They
did it again. They did it again with in this show. I mean, they're doing it with Little Mermaid as well, aren't they?
Little Mermaid, I know a lot of DC characters,
Flash and stuff like that. Yeah. But hopefully they are able to have her character be more front and center and have whatever, because again, I only know that she is an important character in the game, but in the show obviously she hasn't had her limelight yet. But we'll see going forward exactly where it takes it. I'm looking forward to a Witcher season 2. Hopefully like they said, it'll be a far more focused and far more better series going forward in season 2.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just more character moments in a way, and kind of to me it's just explaining, I guess, the conflict between a lot of the people, because a lot of it is the background. I guess in the future it really is the kingdom of Sintra's gone. It's called the Slaughter or something. And I think that's when everything moves forward in the plot in a way of you have Geralt, Triss, Ciri kind of and Yennefer kind of doing their own thing, working as a team. And I think that's where kind of like it really kind of makes it a big story. And it's like a lot of this was pretty much like pre stuff before the big main, I guess, story ahead. So either way, I can't wait to see more. And yeah, just I think it's a good solid effort for Netflix, and I think it's like it was the most viewed show. I think there was news even out of The Mandalorian, I think. So
oh, okay, wow,
good job.
Yeah,